wanted to comment a little bit on this idea that everyone is on the spectrum, and there's an implication there that if that's true, then the idea of being neurodivergent is meaningless because everywhere's somewhere on it. And we can definitely look at it as everyone being on the spectrum, but that doesn't mean that being neurodivergent is meaningless, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So if we think about this idea of neurodivergent and neurotypical, well, it's certainly true that every mind is unique, that everyone is different. And there isn't one kind of way specific, this is a neurotypical mind and everything else is neurodivergent, because there are lots of different neurotypical minds if everyone is unique. What we do have, though, is social norms around how we should feel, how we should behave, how our mind should work. And a neurotypical person is someone who can fit into those social norms at no or very little cost to themselves. It feels easy, it feels very natural. Neurodivergent people, on the other hand, are people who find it really hard or impossible to fit into those social norms, or do so at great cost to themselves, as we're now seeing from the masking and camouflaging research. So I think a really good way to think about this is to make a comparison with skin colour. Because everyone's skin colour is unique, everyone's different. If you put me next to another white person, we would have slightly different coloured skin. So in a way, skin colour is a spectrum, and there's no clear cut-off there. When do you stop being a white person and when do you start being a person of colour? Well, that answer is very specific to where you are. So, for example, if you have slightly darker skin, for example, if you're in Europe and you're from Spain, then your skin is probably a little bit darker than mine, but you're considered a white person because you benefit from all of that white privilege. Now, in the same situation in, say, the Americas, you might be labelled a Latino person and subject to prejudice. So there's no real clear cut-off there between them. And yet, if we were to say, well, skin colour is meaningless, there's no difference between a white person and a person of colour, that would of course be ridiculous. That's a huge difference. And those people who say, well, skin colour isn't important, are typically highly privileged white people. And actually, if you ask people of colour, persons of colour, it is a huge difference, and it really makes a big, meaningful impact on their lives, partly because they've been subject to such high levels of discrimination throughout it. Now, if we think about the spectrum in the same way, a lot of people, although we have unique brains, are able to conform to those social norms and therefore benefit from what we might talk about as neurotypical privilege, because they find it really easy, really natural to fit into how we should behave. And that's what being neurotypical is. So even though two neurotypical people wouldn't have the same identical brain, what they would do is benefit from that privilege of finding it easy to fit in. Whereas for neurodivergent minds, we find it much more difficult to fit in. It might be impossible. It might be done at great personal cost by hiding it. And therefore, we are subject to the same barriers of any minority group, that we're subject to that additional stress and that additional discrimination. So we absolutely can look at it as everyone being on a spectrum. But that doesn't mean that it isn't highly meaningful to talk about the idea of being neurodivergent or neurodivergent being a disability. Because in a world set up for neurotypical people, for neurotypical minds, it is disabling having a neurodivergent brain that cannot conform to those social norms, or that finds it can do, but at great personal cost. I hope that sheds some light. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. Share them in the comments.